obviously Jake. This is going to be, well, I've not told you about this, but I'm starting my own media company, Five Media.
Okay.
And you have the pleasure of being the first interview
Oh
I
my.
do.
All right.
So,
Sweet.
yeah, I thought you'd be a great choice because I love your music. You seem like a great
Thank
guy,
you.
so I just thought, why not get Andrew for this one? So I'm just going to introduce you, how I met you.
Sure.
This is Andrew Vogt. Is Vogt the right pronunciation?
Vote. It's like you vote
Vo.
for president or
Oh,
whatever.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right, Andrew Vo, VOGT, and he is a musician from Chicago who I had the pleasure of reviewing sometime last year. And it was his jazz rendition of Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles that I reviewed. Great piece. I'm still listening to it now and again. Really good piece. So yeah, I just want to ask you a few questions. I know you've got a few new songs out, well, newish,
Hmm.
a new collection of songs out. I just want to ask you about your background as well, get to know you and learn about what you're working on.
Sure.
Um, so first of all, obviously, I know you for the jazz rendition of Eleanor Rigby, um, and I think it's a great take on a classic that is it's kind of I don't want to say bored to death, but everyone knows it. It's a classic that
Oh,
everyone
totally.
knows. Do you know what I mean? It's
Totally.
something that a lot of if you're into music, you know Eleanor Rigby like the back of your hand, you know.
Hmm.
So I thought your take on it was really fresh and actually captured something about the song that I don't think many people picked up on, where actually a little bit quite bluesy and jazzy in its lyrics and what the song is actually about.
Mm.
Um, and so what I want to ask is that something you saw in the song, and how did the idea of making a jazz rendition for that song come about?
Mm. Um, Good question. Thank you for still listening to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sprang about. I remember I had a trio gig here in Chicago like a while ago, and man, I don't even know if it was a trio gig because I can't think of it must have been. I think it was keys, bass, and saxophone. And so obviously it was like, okay, well, sax is going to play the melody. Um, but how do you do a string quartet with piano and just bass? And, the bass line that I came up with on that is a lot more active and funkier than like the normal cello part or whatever that's
Hmm.
on the original. So it kind of stemmed from that. And I was kind of like, all right, how can I do this? I think for a moment, I was even like, how can I just do this as bass, like a bass solo thing? So I was trying to play the melody and the bass line at the same time.
Wow.
And then eventually I was like, you know what? This bass line's cool. It's on its own. Let's keep it there and let's put the melody on top of that. So yeah, it started out of that. And we opened it up. I don't even remember how we got to the solo section that first time because it was just some random gig. And actually, somebody just called it. They were just like, do you know Eleanor Rigby? And I'm like, well, yeah. And it's not like a normal, like you said, it's a super common cover, but like on a
Yeah.
jazz gig, it's not like the first thing
It's
somebody's going
not
to
at all,
call.
yeah.
No. So I was just like, yeah, I think we can fake that. And sure, I don't even remember how we played it the first time, but I like kind of went back home after that. I was like, man, that was a lot of fun. I
Hmm.
never really thought to cover it that way. So then I ended up sitting down with it and really fleshing it out a little bit more. And yeah, like I said, it started with the bass line. And then I think for a while I was like, oh, it'd be beautiful to have the saxophone playing the melody since it's just a really pretty melody in general. And then for some reason I was like, let's put more horns on it. Probably because of all of the other string quartet stuff that was going on. I was like, the more you listen to it, the more you're like, man, there's all these like cool little lines and stuff that
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
never make it into other covers and stuff like that. And yeah, and then all the other bluesy stuff that came with it was just like kind of a byproduct of playing with everyone in the group. Everyone I kind of purposely wanted to make it a little bit open. The like the melody itself is pretty heavily arranged, but when I was like, hey, when you get to soloing, just do whatever you feel like. I always try to make sure there's like room there for whoever's improvising or just playing the song. Like I always try to make sure there's a little bit of room for them to be themselves and be creative, or else it's just like notes on a piece of paper. So
Absolutely.
um, So yeah, it just kind of all stemmed from that. I really think we rehearsed it like once. Like I don't remember rehearsing much.
Really?
Yeah, I don't remember rehearsing much before
Wow.
the recording session. There was also like a bunch of other music that was recorded
Yeah.
during that time. So I'm sure we spent like a little bit of time on it, but that was definitely the more one of the bigger like through composed type of ones that I had worked on. And they had the most instruments and stuff like that. But yeah, again, like everyone I called, they're just great musicians and fantastic. They can read music, but also improvise and just understand what I'm trying to communicate
Hmm.
verbally or musically. So yeah, it all came together like really, really nicely, and I was super proud of that one. But yeah, it's a great song, and like you said too, with the with it being a cover and a super well known cover,
Hmm.
um, I was trying to like I'm just a huge Beatles fan, as sure many
As
millions of
most are,
musicians are.
yeah.
Yeah, as most people are. And it's just like, where do you even start? I'm like, I could go into some really deep, obscure Paul McCartney, solo record and do a cover of that, but I don't know if everyone will know that. And I was kind of like, why don't I just start from the one that's like probably the most covered, other than like Yesterday and maybe Blackbird or
Hmm.
something like that. I was like, let's just start with the basics and do something that people kind of haven't done before. At that time too, I was listening to a lot of the SF Jazz Collective, which is kind of
Okay.
like a similar instrumentation, and they were doing. I think they still probably do it. They kind of like would always put out once or twice, maybe once a year, maybe every other year or something like that. Um, this albums that are dedicated to a certain musician. So like one year they did all the music of Stevie Wonder, and then one year they did all the music of like Ornette Coleman or John Coltrane. So sometimes it's more jazzy, sometimes it's more like pop or like R&B focused, but they always kind of like focused on a one artist in particular for the record. And I remember hearing that and like having like all of those instruments and sounds in my head, and then being like, what if they did a Beatles version of that? That would be
Yeah.
sweet. And I'm sure they probably a million people have told them that, and they're probably like, no, that's too obvious. But that's kind of where
But
that
it's
whole inspiration
so
came from.
it's like so obvious that no one tries to do it, and so then it's like a paradox. It's like it's so
Yeah,
obvious no one does it, but no one's
yeah.
done it. Do you know what I mean? So it's a really creative idea that I quite enjoyed, and it's amazing to hear that you did that in one rehearsal, and it was just a random thought that popped into your head. That's incredible. But yeah, it was fun hearing the different instruments along the track and how it all comes together as well into kind of a bigger picture, and it transforms the song, I think, in a great way. Dare I say,
Thank you.
more fun to listen to than the original, dare I say,
Oh
dare I
man.
say.
Well,
But
thank you. I
I
appreciate
don't
that.
want to
Okay.
anger any Beatles fans that may be
I
watching.
know
Um,
it's tough.
yeah, especially in the UK, because um,
Sure.
the Beatles are our bread and butter. So um, Eleanor Rigby obviously was created with Christian Newman, is that name right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Christian Newman and Stu Minderman.
Hmm.
So obviously
Yep.
these two also did a great job as well. I think Christian's on the drums, isn't he? And Stu's on the
Yes.
keys. Is that right?
Hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Um, you've used these two people on your newest batch of tracks, your last three tracks. Is there like a chemistry with you guys that like you kind of bring out the best of each other on your songs? And how did you guys meet as well? Because it seems to me, I'm not aware of these artists, I only know them through you. So is there like a relationship where, you guys know each other throughout the jazz scene, or how did you
Hmm.
guys get to know each other, and why does that
Yeah.
relationship with you three work so well?
Um, they're it works so well because they, like I said, are just like some of the best musicians I know.
Hmm.
And they definitely bring the best out of me. I hope I do the same to them, but they're phenomenal musicians. And I recorded this stuff quite a while ago, and had the pleasure, like Christian actually, he's not, he used to live in Chicago. Now he lives in LA, still lives here in Chicago. But while we were recording this music, they were both here, obviously living, and we were playing a lot together. in all sorts of different projects, whether it was like, you know, Christian's album or Stu's album or somebody else's record or just a random gig in Chicago. There was a period where we were all playing, actually the whole band really playing a lot. And yeah, like, and then Christian uh like moved out to LA, went to the what's now I think the Herbie Hancock Institute, but it was the Thelonious Monk Institute, and got he got in the rotation. And I mean, he's been playing with amazing artists ever since he moved out there. He was like, we knew he was going to do great as soon as he was like, I'm going to move to LA. We're like, yeah, we know you're going to be great. I think at like when I heard last, I haven't talked to him actually in a little while, but when I saw last, he was on the road with Jacob Collier. I don't know if it was the most recent tour or like a couple years ago, but he was working with him a lot. And then same for Stu, he's just still crushing it here in Chicago. He plays
Wow.
or was playing with Kurt Elling and kind of has tons of his own music as well. Um, so yeah, those guys are just like, those are my heroes, and I look up to them when I'm able to like call them and they're able to play my music and are down for it. I'm just like, thank you so much. So there's some great chemistry, and like I said, they're obviously just professional, super unique musicians, and both of them are just very um, sensitive to the music or whatever you bring in. You know, they're very much like, how do you want this to go? Some people will kind of look at your music and be like, all right, I'm going to do my own thing without even asking you.
Yeah.
But they're very like kind of aware of like, hey, how do you want me to do this? And then if I'm like, I don't know, make it up yourself, then obviously they will. But they are always kind of making sure that whoever wrote it, like the intention is there, and whatever they're like understanding what that intention was. Um, so yeah, we played a bunch of trio stuff together around that time. It'd be great to bring him back out here and do some sort of like reunion show.
Absolutely.
I don't know if he's too big time now. Might be hard to fly him back for a show, but again, yeah, like just like you to answer your question, we just met I think on the music scene. Um,
Mm.
uh, Christian went went to school in I think Western Michigan, and Stu went out to in Northern or NIU. Both are like near Chicago, but like Western Michigan's like a couple hours away.
Yeah, bit
NIU's about
far.
an hour away. Yeah, so like we didn't meet each other in college or anything. Just
Mm.
started playing together in Chicago after college, and yeah, you know, the rest is history. Like I said, it is a cool, really like unique scene in Chicago where everyone's very supportive and just constantly kind of like throwing each other gigs and calling each other for people or calling people for their music. And if you're not called, it's not this like weird like offensive thing. It's kind of like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, well they got this person and they're also great, and you know what, I'm busy anyway, so it's never taken that personally as um
It's not
I've
competitive.
heard. Yeah, it's not that
Yeah.
competitive. There's tons of work, and obviously people really like sharpen each other. Everyone's really good and like bring out the best, like you said, in other people. But there's not this like it's not like the nasty competitive edge where in some other towns I've heard it's kind of like you're really fighting for like a $50 gig, and it's
Mm.
nice to not have to do that here. so
Yeah.
so yeah, they're both amazing, and you know, I think the world of both of them and everyone else for that matter on the rest of um the record. I think the rest of the guys, I'm trying to think of who else is on that track. You know, Dustin is the saxophone player that takes the solo.
Yeah.
Um and he was playing with Bon Iver for a little bit. And he's
Wow,
also got
really?
like this amazing, yeah, he's got this amazing
Wow.
band called Twin Talk in Chicago here too. That's like just bass, actually, yeah, bass, sax, and drums. And they're awesome. They've released a bunch of really beautiful music. Um, Rajiv is here in Chicago as well. Still, I know he's out on the road doing a bunch of musicals and stuff like that, but he's got a record under his name. And who else was on that? Joel lives here, and yeah, so the rest of the people live here in Chicago, um, and yeah, they're just all making great music still. So it's cool to be just a part of that and have everyone just
Yeah.
constantly kind of creating something new.
It's so cool how like you guys have um you make music together, but you've all kind of spread out and you're all doing your own thing. And maybe once in a while you guys commune back together and make something
Hmm.
like the songs, you make. Um, and yeah, you can definitely hear that. Like when you said your friends Christian and Stu, there isn't a competitiveness there. They let you take the lead, or like, okay, what do you want me to do? Or, you know,
Hmm.
you can definitely hear that in the song. That it flows perfectly. I think sometimes when there is that person that wants to be like the star of the show or stealing the limelight a bit, that does affect the music. But I think in yours, you can strongly tell that there's a lot of chemistry within your group, and you kind of know each other inside and out. And it just makes the music great. Um, and you've spoken as well about the Chicago scene. That sounds like it's doing really well. I mean, over
Hmm.
here in the UK, especially in London, we've got our own kind of new wave jazz scene going on, jazz revival going on.
Yeah.
Ezra Collective, and I think the Silhouette Project as well. Little Sims is doing a little bit of jazz influence stuff. So we've got our own thing going on.
Hmm.
That's kind of taken to the forefront of our music scene. Is something like that going on in America as a whole? Or if it isn't, do you see it happening in the near future? Or what's going on with jazz in America from your perspective?
Good question. I would first definitely agree. You guys are crushing it over there. Everything that I
Yeah.
hear from the UK, I'm like, oh my God, this sounds better than America. What's going on? Yeah, there's so many great artists over there. I would say like Tom Misch too is kind of doing that
Tom
new
Misch.
like beat
Yeah.
jazz thing, and there's a lot of that here as well. But I feel like you guys are almost like not pioneering it, but it feels like there's more coming from over there. A really good buddy of mine is from Chicagoland area, moved to Scotland, which I know is not super close, not close to London, but it's close enough. And
Yeah.
I've visited over there a couple times, and like I've seen the Edinburgh scene. And it's like really happening too.
And
Some
it's a
of his
great
friends,
city.
yeah, like some of the music that's come out of there. He's like, hey, check this out. I'm on this. Dude, this
Mhm.
sounds awesome. And some of the vocalists, it blows my mind. Like um, some of the singers over there have like American accents when they sing.
Yeah.
Like when they sing jazz, like they do that whole thing. You would have no idea. And so I was like watching a set, and I'm like, man, she sounds awesome. And then get off stage and talk to her, and she's got like a total Scottish accent.
British
I'm like,
accent.
what? Like
Yeah.
just blow, yeah, it blew my mind. Um, so yeah, like obviously there's like some awesome like you guys are like figuring out what we're doing and doing it well over there, and that's like the best, whatever, imitation is the sincerest, the best form of flattery. It's like
Absolutely.
I feel like you guys are totally nailing it, because I know there's sometimes some places where people try to do any style of music, not just jazz, and like it doesn't come across as great. But yeah, I love everything I've heard over there. It's been awesome. It's kind of interesting here in Chicago in particular. It's always been like a pretty well-known jazz or blues town. There's always been like, and
The
I've
strong
never,
history. Definitely a
yeah,
strong
yeah.
history.
And it's always just been here. It's never really gone away. And I'm from the area. I grew up in Aurora, which is a suburb of Chicago. But even in Aurora, it was like, oh yeah, you have blues bars and jazz clubs and gigs. They were all over the place. So it's never really gone away, and it's also never really like resurged, if that makes sense. It just feels like there's always been this like, especially the community that I've been a part of with the jazz scene, it's just always like people are doing cool stuff. There's been a couple of people that have taken off here more recently, like Mackay McCraven. I don't know if you know
Yes, yeah.
him. Yeah, like he's kind of a
Big
Chicago
name.
guy, and like his whole crew with Marquise and all of them. They started blowing up. They're a little bit older than me, and I've always looked up to them as well. And so it's really cool to see that like wave, I guess, take off. But I would say that's maybe a little bit even different from either the UK sound or London or I mean New York or LA too. They both have very different um, sounds. Like I've obviously gone to New York a handful of times and just seen what people are doing there, and it seems like it's a lot more um, like intense. I don't know if intense is the right word, but like very just like we are playing jazz that's very complicated music, and we are not
Yeah.
like conceding, we're not giving up for anything, and that's cool. Like it's totally cool. It's
Yeah.
the sound, and people are doing amazing things over there. And then kind of LA is kind of almost the opposite, where it's like we're doing really laid back music. Sometimes there's not a lot of chords, there's
It's
not
a
a lot of
coastal difference,
soloing.
isn't
Yeah, it is. And then we're
it?
sitting here and kind of in the middle doing a little bit. There's definitely like Chicago definitely has some grit and some edge to it, which I really like.
Mhm.
There's also just this really long-standing tradition of just playing like swing music and just playing like the old standards, which sometimes you don't get on the either of the coast, especially I would say in LA, New York. There's always kind of been like a hey, there's a section of people that are always playing just like traditional swing music, but in Chicago, what's cool is there's always been that as well. And I kind of grew up going through those and seeing all those jam sessions, playing those gigs for a long time. And then as all of my friends and buddies from jam sessions start to branch out and do their own music and play with their own people, that's when people started to get influenced by other types of music. Um, but there's always like I feel like most gigs that I play that are like jazz gigs, there's always like a couple of tunes where we're just like swinging. There's we're gonna do this and it's gonna sound awesome. And there's always this like tradition thing that's been acknowledged, I guess. So yeah, it's kind of interesting, and it's hard to like see it um, resurge when you're like a part of it as well. I think because we're just
Yeah, that's a
constantly
good
like
point.
going out and seeing shows and like this person's awesome, this person's awesome. But
Mhm.
you do notice it a bit more when you go to other like towns. Like I said, if you go to New York or when I've been to Edinburgh, um, they were like, man, I mean, I went to London one time, but just went to Ronnie Scott's. And that was awesome there. And like, I remember they got the
Yeah.
biggest kick out of me being from Chicago. It's like, you guys sound great here. I don't
Yeah.
know what you're talking about. So, um, so yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but I do think it's very much alive and well here. People are always just surprising me, all my friends putting out music. I'm always just like, man, this stuff is amazing and incredible, and everyone deserves to blow up. I know, not everyone does, but it's really cool when you see your friends kind of start to succeed and take it to the next level, especially with creative music, because we got to keep doing that.
Absolutely. And it's interesting to hear your perspective of going to the UK and hearing all this jazz music. Because I feel like a lot of the time people in the UK think like we're in a bubble. And like we have this like victim mentality where we're really good at music, but no one really appreciates our music because we're from the UK. So it's cool like hearing other people from, especially America like yourself, which is kind of like the hub of music in general, really. Coming over here and thinking, wow, they're doing some great stuff. Um, and like you
Absolutely.
said, it's that's an interesting point you made about being a musician in a scene and not being able to recognize when it's resurging, because obviously musicians will always make music no matter what, no matter if there's an audience for it or not. Musicians will
Yeah.
always create. So that's an interesting point and perspective I liked there. Um, but obviously the Chicago scene you talked about, you have your own style compared to other cities like LA and New York. New York being obviously a little more brash and erratic, and LA being more
Mm,
laid back. On your new songs, actually, you have kind of this. I don't know if it's a new style for you, but it was a little bit different from the Eleanor Rigby song,
hmm
um, where it was like almost like a grandiose, um, I don't know, like grandiose vibe or cinematic
hmm
atmosphere in your new songs, especially Awakening and
mm.
was it Deep Blues, Dark Blues?
Yeah. Yeah. Dark
Dark
blues. Yeah.
Blues, very cinematic. Is that something that's a new style
Thank
for
you.
you, or is that um, something that's a part of the Chicago jazz?
Well, that's a good question. A little bit of both. And thank you too for that. Yeah, I like I don't even realize these things, and so I'm glad you're saying them. Like, you're right. It is pretty cinematic.
Very cinematic, yeah.
Yeah. I also in my free time which is very limited, but when I do have time, I write for my wife's string quartet. It's called Atlas.
Yeah.
The Atlas String Quartet, and they're all kind of they're based in Chicago, but they're all over the place. One lives in LA, one lives in Nashville, and the other two live here in Chicago. Um, so that is like definitely kind of started to inject into my music, whether I like it or not, because it just happens, especially some of this music like we recorded and then later I was like, oh man, it would be really cool if there were some strings on this part or
Mm.
whatever. So we really blew this section up. So like dark blues in particular, like we recorded that whole thing and it sounded awesome and everyone crushed it and it would have been fine without strings. But I was like, what if we added some
What if
strings at
we,
the
yeah.
end and just really just made this thing like going into, overdrive. I'm trying to think if there's any on the other two. I think that was the main one. There is a version of Awakening, the one that I just put out, that does have strings that I need to actually finish and put out because it's beautiful as well. It's a
Please
different
do.
saxophone player.
I'd
Yeah,
love to
it's
hear
it's
that.
even it's even like slower and just more um like you said, like just cinematic
Yeah.
and peaceful. And I kind of forgot about it. I was like, oh my gosh, I focused so much on the dark blues. And then the other day I saw it in my Dropbox folder and I'm like, oh dude, I need to finish this. So yeah, that's always been kind of like a part of my music as well. And I always love to kind of just feature it, not always go full overboard. There's other things that I've written for them that are like pure string quartets, or that type of music. And so we have that kind of going on. But then I like to have this like cross pollination of jazz and classical whenever I can. And I would say, like, to the second part of your question was, if that is that happening in Chicago? Yes. There's this amazing bass player in Chicago. His name is Matt Eulery, and he writes just this amazing, amazing music. And he kind of always changes his like his instrumentation all over the place. But I'm a huge fan of his music and his writing and his bass playing. So that is like absolutely inspired me. He's kind of like I would say in the next level of like he plays with Micaiah and those type of guys, and I always look up to him as well. And I'm just kind of like listening to his music and being like, how can I do that? um, but yeah, he's wrote some amazing like string stuff, bigger, larger ensemble stuff, but just kind of always just using this huge um, like palette, sonic palette, and just being able to like
Mm.
draw from whatever he really hears and making each record. I think he has like 9 or 10 records out, and they're all just like totally different. They all have the same voice. You can tell it's his writing, but they're all instrumentally a lot different. Um, so there's that, and then there's other people. There's a lot of other big bands here in Chicago too, that are either doing like the old school, like standard big band repertoire, but there's also a lot of people just writing for larger ensembles here. Um, so that takes a huge part of it. And I do think actually Chicago has a pretty decent, um, like classical music scene as well,
Okay.
like Northwestern and then CSO and all of this stuff. Like there's that whole side to it too. And Northwestern is like the university up in Evanston, and they actually have like a great string program and a great jazz program. So I think over there, and I'm sure it's just within Chicago in general, but I've noticed there's like a really nice hybrid over there where they kind of help each other out and are trying to collaborate a lot more. So there's a lot of that. There's definitely tons of like big grand music that's going on, as well as like at the same time though, I love like just playing jazz trio with piano player. So just trying to keep it like unlimited, but also not trying to do everything on each track, because sometimes you don't need all of that. But yeah, it's like a huge pleasure to work for or to work with them, and not to mention it's my wife, so that's always fun to be like, hey,
Yeah, well.
can you play on my track? um, so yeah, it's been like an amazing project. They've done all sorts of really cool stuff. They've played Red Rocks with this EDM artist Seven Lions, and they've been all over the world doing cool stuff. So I couldn't talk more highly of them either. But yeah, it's um, I think that's how I like to try to like look at any composition. It's just like you write it, and sometimes it like I sometimes I have to sit back for a second and like listen to it, maybe even sit with it for a couple months and be like, is
Mm.
this done? Maybe not. So a lot of that music was like we recorded it and then I sat with it for a while and then finally went, okay, this one needs strings, this one doesn't need strings, this one's done, this one doesn't need anything, this one we're gonna just throw completely away. but but yeah, I do appreciate the cinematic compliment. I'm trying my best over
It
here.
it definitely is. It towards the end, especially on Dark Blues, it almost had like a Mike Dean quality to it, where I was like,
Mm,
wow, this really could be in a movie or in a concert somewhere. I could really see it. So yeah, amazing
thank
work as
you.
well. I'm just going to hurry a little bit because I think I'm running out of time on the meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
It
go
does
ahead.
it's all right. It's not your fault. Um, so final question here. Obviously you've been working on these three new songs.
Hmm.
Awakening being the newest one that you've released last month, wasn't it?
Yes, yes. You
February,
know,
yes.
no better than me. I'm like, wait a minute. Yes.
Time moves fast. Um, so yeah, last month your newest release song Awakening. Can we expect an album or a project, or is it just you're working on these songs individually and you're just seeing what happens?
Yes, great question. And CDs are sitting over here. I don't even know if people still use CDs, but I had to get them. Um, the whole record will be called Awakening. I'm glad you asked this because I need to start.
Yes.
Um, I need to start
Marketing.
talking about it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I would go grab one, but they're sitting over there. But anyways, the record is called Awakening. Obviously, that was the last one that came out was the title track. Um, so that record will feature a lot of the songs that I've been kind of releasing as singles, as well as a couple other ones. And then there's a couple more that didn't make the record, but I'm gonna like continue putting them out this year just as like a whole um, project and just to get it done. It's exciting to finally put it out there in the world. So yeah, like I said, the CDs came in um, a couple of weeks ago, maybe even like a month ago. And then I do have vinyls on the way as well, which
Oh,
I'm excited
nice.
about.
Nice.
I actually they're coming from Paris, so I think they have to make it all the way over there, and then so I'm waiting on that. But those will be available at the same time. So I'm kind of waiting until once those vinyls get in, then I'll probably pick a legitimate
Mm,
release date because you never know. Sometimes with vinyl stuff, it's like it can take 6 weeks and then it can take 6 months. So hopefully the plan is to like probably middle of this year. My birthday is always like almost right in the middle of the year, which is like July, middle of July or something. So I'll probably shoot for something like that as
yeah.
far as a release date.
A present to
But yeah,
yourself.
yeah, right. I know. Thanks. But you finally did it. um, yeah, and actually, like coincidentally, I released Dark Blues on my birthday last year, and it did really well. I don't know. Maybe that's probably not a thing. It's probably just a
You
pure
might be lucky.
coincidence. Yeah, I think I was just lucky and got lucky with the Spotify. But anyways, yes, that's a huge thing that I'm looking forward to this year is just having the full thing out. Um, we'll probably do some sort of release show here in Chicago. Again, like I said, I haven't figured it out yet just because I'm waiting on all the merch to get in. But I'm very excited to have that completed. Um, like I said, there'll be a couple more singles that'll accompany the release, as well as like after the release, there'll be a couple more coming out. And then I have like a piano trio record as well that's kind of on the shelf waiting to be released as well. So I'm going to probably look forward to maybe start releasing that towards the middle to end of this year as singles as well. And then I just want to get back in the studio with these guys and do another one. So I'm sure there'll be more out.
It never
It's been
stops.
no, it doesn't. And
It never
there's always
stops.
something cool.
Yeah. Awesome. I mean, I'm personally, I'm really excited to hear that.
No,
Because
thank you.
what you've done with the past few tracks, it sounds really creative and new, that I've personally not heard in jazz. In any song really. So yeah, I think it has the potential to be something really cool. And if there's a place where I can buy those vinyls, maybe your Instagram, if you want to shout out your Instagram and
Yes,
Spotify,
yes,
um,
yes.
I would
Links
definitely
below or
buy one.
above, wherever
Yes,
they are.
I'll definitely put all your links in the description and wherever. Um,
Sweet.
but yeah, excited to hear about your album. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Of
Um,
course, man. Thank you.
amazing guy, I have to say, really nice guy. And from discovering you with the Eleanor Rigby rendition to now interviewing you, hearing about your new music, the Chicago scene, and your new album, it's been a pleasure, sincerely, Andrew.
Oh,
Um,
likewise, man. I appreciate you. I'm happy I'm number one, the first guy to do it.
number one,
Honored.
thank you so much. Um, and yeah, Andrew's links down below. Make sure you follow him on Spotify, Instagram, everything. Um, thank you so much.
You bet, man. Appreciate it.